Welcome to Catholic Champion. I am your host, John Yep, and my friend and co-host, Michael Hichborn. Today on the show, we are talking about the Democrat Party's political enemies and Hunter Biden's pardon. Stay tuned. I said Democrat Party's political enemies. These aren't just enemies. These are prisoners. These are prisoners in prison, okay? Federal prison. And we're going to talk about these people because justice is on the line right now in America. And we're seeing that played out right now in the political scene. And we're going to talk about that. Michael, what's going on? How was your Thanksgiving break?
Thanksgiving was fantastic. Had a lot of family with me. And, I got to see my two of my nieces and nephews no, it was really good. It was relaxing and we got to catch up on a lot of things and we actually toasted at Thanksgiving with Trump champagne to the in thanks for being spared a Kamala regime.
What was it? Literally Trump's own champagne brand?
Yeah.
I didn't had okay. Yep. I knew he had wine, but it was champagne.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Technically a brute. Because champagne it's only champagne if it comes from champagne, but
this is true. Yep,
same thing.
That's very true. Size of the turkey. Did you outdo the Yeps over here? We had a 22.3.
Actually, I don't know how big our turkey was. We had smoked.
You probably just shot it out in the forest yourself, knowing you in Virginia. But
yeah.
But that's great. It was just a tremendous holiday. I remember being overseas as a seminarian and being among a whole bunch of other cultures. They always loved that the United States had a specific day just to thank God for everything. Like everything else was just every other culture had one just to celebrate this, that, the other thing, but just specifically gratitude is in some ways unique to America. So
absolutely.
Great. And we're on to Christmas. I wish it was all fun and festivities, but we got justice on the line right now, right? It seems like that as it broke a few days ago that President Biden, his handlers, maybe it was Jill in this case, decided to pardon their son. So when you saw that, Michael, what'd you think? Good move, bad move? What would you do?
What would I do? Well, to be honest, I wouldn't have given him a carte blanche, get out of jail free card for the last 10 years to say, hey, if you've maybe done anything wrong over the last 10 years, get out of jail free card. I wouldn't have done that, not unless I was trying to cover my own tail. And I think that that's exactly what's going on here, because when you start to look at the business dealings that he had with the biolabs in Ukraine and his energy company and all the different companies and dealings that he had with China, the fact that the big guy was involved. So what you're doing is you're saying, we're going to give him a carte blanche, get out of jail free check for any involvement with any of this.
That's absolutely. I mean, in case you're just catching up on this, what we're talking about: pardon President Biden, pardoning his son. What did he do with the traffic violation? What's going on here? Forgot a seatbelt? No, this is much worse. This is serious stuff. So President Biden, this is from USA Today, so secular or more liberal leaning source, has their own article titled "President Biden bypassed the Justice Department in pardoning son." A federal judge in Delaware formally ended the gun case against Hunter Biden on Tuesday after President Joe Biden gave his son an unusually broad pardon without going through customary processing by the Justice Department's pardon office. So this really just came right from the Oval Office, and it's unique in so many ways. He bypassed the traditional order of stuff, and like you referenced, Michael, the scope of this pardon, it's like a catch-all for everything. What is that? Everything that he's done. A jury convicted Biden in June, and he was awaited sentencing on December 12th, but Biden gave his son a full and unconditional pardon Sunday for any federal crimes he may have committed from 2014 through the end of this year, which legal experts call the very unusual clemency. Wait, hold on a second. through the end of this year, does that mean if he commits a future crime between now and the end of Christmas, like he's still good to go? Is that what that means? I have no
Uh,
idea.
that's ostensibly what it means, but I'm pretty sure that when you read the wording of it, the specific end date, I think, was December 1st or December 2nd of this year.
Right. So whatever it is, I mean, it's a blanket pardon. It's huge. Okay, if you were dad and this happened to your son and you're the president of the United States, because there are conservatives on both sides of this issue saying that was bad move, good move. So throwing it out there, Michael, what would you do?
Well, I think for me, it would depend on the nature of a particular crime that my son had been found guilty of. If it was, let's say he went on a 3-state killing spree and took out, 50 people. Well, there's no way I would give him a pardon. I mean, that would be unjust. And as a father, it's my duty and responsibility to see to the spiritual well-being of my son, to make sure that he not only faces the consequences of his actions, but makes restitution to the point that he can in this life, so as not to face those consequences in the next. And so as a father, but as a Catholic father, my whole approach to what my duties are to my children is to ensure the salvation of their souls. This is not what Joe Biden is doing. This is a political move, and it may be an emotional move, but quite honestly, given the nature of the pardon, I'm more prone to believe that this was a political move to cover for other crimes that are part of the Biden family.
So, okay, so well explained, but in this case specifically, if Hunter was your son, would you pardon him?
No,
you would not. You would not. And there's one of my good friends made a big public post about, as a dad, this is what he should be doing. He should be pardoning his son. And this particular friend's got a big following, and I tend to agree with him on most stuff. But here, I think I disagree, because let's again, this is not a traffic violation. As you kind of went into a little bit, Michael, this is, you have, first and foremost, think about all those pictures that were found on his computer.
Yep.
A lot of those girls, those were underage girls, right? That he was messing around with. So he has hurt those lives tremendously. Yep. There's the scandal. There's the drugs. There is the landlord in California who he basically ripped off $300,000 and never paid his rent. Okay. There's no restitution in the works for that man.
Right.
And then you get to the level of what he's done potentially on a treasonous level with the United States of America and what's going on in Ukraine. Right. And there's a lot there that, with the Burisma and him covering it up, which is like you said, Michael, it's like, how can you just let this guy off the hook? Right. This is serious stuff.
Well, it's very serious. And look, the specific charges that he was found guilty of had to do with purchasing a gun when he was not supposed to be purchasing a gun. And if you're going to look at just that specific crime and say, I'm going to pardon him because he was unjustly maligned because of this was a political prosecution. This was a political move. Let's remind everybody that this is Biden's DOJ that did this. Right. So, saying that this was all politically motivated and politically predicated is kind of a non-starter to begin with. But the carte blanche pardon does not meet with his rhetoric. The fact that he said, well, this is just because it's a political move. It was a political stunt. That's why he's being persecuted. Well, fine, then pardon him for that. But that's not what he did.
I think it has even greater consequences for the whole justice system in general. Again, just referencing my time overseas and stepping outside the United States and living among so many other different cultures and looking back in the United States and what they thought about us. One of the things that they loved about America was this idea that we follow the law. Mm-hmm. Like the law meant something. Other cultures, it's not the same tradition or experience or without getting into specifics about who I'm talking about, different cultures, but just lining up. Okay. I remember standing outside sometimes and waiting for a Vatican event, and the Americans, we would all line up in order. Okay. And we would be there. If the event opened up at 11 o'clock, we would all be in single file line, 7 a.m. If someone comes at 8 a.m., they go to the back of the line. Other cultures, I won't say, who would just like come and they would just like stand right there in the front. And we're like, what the heck? What's going on? You guys can't budge. And those particular cultures are kind of laugh. It's like that's you guys do it in America. Right here, it's just kind of like it's the free for all, right? There are pros and cons, but like the reality is we have a system of justice, which it's a sense of it brings order, it brings peace, it allows for honestly economic prosperity and so many other forms of prosperity. And when that begins to shut down, as it has in a horrible way over the last 4 years, which I want to really get into and bring people's attention during the show, justice is on the line. Justice in America is on the line, and that's so key. It's a bedrock principle of America and for the world. And I think we see this right now with the Hunter Biden case being played out with the pardoning. This is not good. It's going to have devastating effects on the whole system all across the country.
Well, bet. Let's just remind everybody that back in February, Joe Biden put out on Twitter that nobody is above the law. And he was saying this in direct, he was directing this at Donald Trump. So saying that, Donald Trump is not above the law. And by declaring the universal, nobody is above the law, he was directing that at Donald Trump. But the fact of the matter is, he's now telling everybody that some people are above the law, and that to pardon somebody for 10 years worth of possible crimes, basically saying anything that he may have done over the last 10 years that could be considered a federal crime is now he's pardoned for. That would include things like treason. That would include things like sedition. That, these are horrible offenses against the American people that he might be implicated for. And one of the things that I really like to do when I look at a situation like this is to try and figure out, well, what's not being said. What he is saying by not saying it is that there is a reason to believe that Hunter Biden is guilty of certain crimes against the United States for the last 10 years. And by extension, that would mean what we could possibly look into would be any of these foreign dealings. Now, I think that, whether it was Joe Biden or Jill Biden or whomever was giving legal advice for this, my suspicion is that they believed that by pardoning Hunter, that would then preclude any kind of investigation into his dealings, his business dealings, but it doesn't. Because you can still investigate the situation and then, try to determine, is there something illegal that may have taken place here? Just because he's involved doesn't exonerate anybody who is a business partner of his. It doesn't exonerate anybody who is acting as a liaison on behalf of him or any of his business interests overseas. So, in fact, as one of the articles that we were reading together indicates, he may have actually inadvertently made it so that he can be forced to testify, because now that he's not under threat of being prosecuted, he can be compelled to testify against others with regard to his business dealings. So it may have saved him, but it won't have saved the people around him.
That might have been a legal mishap they saw. People on our side were pointing out, as you just said, James Comer of Kentucky, I believe,
Yep.
On Fox, and talking about that he will talk to Pam Bondi, hopefully the future Attorney General of America, and put it out there that Hunter can still be brought before Congress to testify, and he cannot plead the Fifth Amendment because he's not going to be incriminating himself, right? So you gotta talk up and share what you know. So who knows? It might be a blessing in disguise that he got a pardon that will be used. When I say to our advantage, I mean to the advantage of true justice for what's going on in America. Okay. Again, this is not retribution. This is not like this guy needs to suffer for his crimes. I mean, there is that because human justice is human justice. But when you think about, and this gets in a little bit of the Ukraine war, but the amount of lives in Ukraine that have been lost on both sides, potentially needlessly, for what's gone on. Okay. And this has happened because I believe there's a huge contingent of our deep state which loves the war and wants to keep it going. So there are real lives that have been destroyed, and that the Ukraine as a country's been destroyed, and Hunter and the Bidens are all tied up into that. So this is serious. We've got to get to the bottom of this. So if that's the case, if there's a legal case to be made where he can now testify, let's do it. Let's bring it out there.
Right. No, I completely agree. And now I do think that what will happen, there will be an investigation.
Yep.
Hunter will be forced to testify at some point, but then what they'll do,
presidential immunity?
No, I think that it's going to be declared that Joe Biden is incompetent to stand trial because he's mentally compass mentis. He's not there.
Right. Yep. That's very well could be the case. Which is just insane. I mean, it's still insane. The day you wake up in America and you think it's a normal thing that most people would acknowledge that president doesn't even know what's going on around him. Like that is normal. Like we really have no idea who's been running this country. Okay. We have suspicions, but it's out of control. And the rest of the world is seeing that because there's chaos right now on the world stage all around. Okay. So we'll see a lot to be had there. And that's why we got to pray that these nominees get across, are confirmed by the Senate, Pam Bondi and others, because we have to have justice back. We absolutely do. And I want to go on our next point. Just people need to be talking, praying, pressuring our senators, asking President Trump to keep the political prisoners of the Democrat Party regime right there in the front of our minds. Okay. These are people unjustly held. Let's get into those three categories quickly, just kind of to bring to mind of who they are. We have first and foremost the pro-lifers, right? These are at least probably 24 or so. And Mike, I don't even know if you know some of those people yourself, these pro-lifers, but who've been convicted for the FACE Act, for stepping on the wrong piece of the sidewalk or whatever. And they get like 10, 15 years in prison. They've had their houses basically raided. Hashtag Mark Hawk, and others. So, and then you have our father Dave Nix, who's to report to federal or for court to be sentenced in January, right? And President Trump has said on day one that he's going to be freeing these people from prison. Okay, so they've been weaponized. The Justice Department has been weaponized against moms and school boards. And do you see that Trump, by the way? I think it was a couple days ago. He said we're going to decriminalize speaking up at school board meetings by parents, which is just, okay, you got those people. You have and then you got the J6ers. Michael, did you know this? That even, of course, when the Hunter Biden pardon came out, Trump immediately was on Truth and said, fine, this has given us the leeway to be able to free all the J6ers with the same categories of justice or right. So, but even in spite of all this, it's kind of reversed the other way. People realize that it essentially probably was a Fedsurrection. Okay. There was some vandalism that should not have happened on our side. They should not have got right. They should never have trespassed. Got it. But it's a little difficult when the guards are opening up the doors and ushering you in, right? And there are federal agents involved, instigating the whole time. That's been shown and documented, okay? Well, those J6ers are now in prison. And just 2 days ago, as reported by Julie Kelly, fantastic reporter, there were 4 trials in D.C., 4 sentencings, Michael, just 2 days ago of J6ers. Isn't that crazy? Like,
that's nuts.
Still, yeah.
To put this into perspective, though, I want to point out that President Jimmy Carter He he pardoned, commuted, and rescinded the convictions of 566 people, and that was in addition to the carte blanche pardoning of over 200,000 Vietnam War draft dodgers. So
Wow.
when you pardon 200,000 men because they were dodging the draft, which would have included Bill Clinton. So we got Bill Clinton because of Jimmy Carter. Then what you're talking about is a cascading effect, and it shows the scope and power that the president has with these pardons. So if President Trump were to go in and pardon the J6ers, which I think is justified because the vast majority of them were there peacefully, they were invited in by the police. There's video that shows them being invited and welcomed in. Some of the Metro State Police or the Metropolitan Police were guiding them through the Capitol building. They didn't commit the horrendous acts of violence that they're accused of. There was some violence and there was some vandalism, but by and large, these people were simply trespassing, and they were charged as insurrectionists, and they're held in federal prisons. They're being tried through private and secret tribunals, and the fact of the, I mean, their civil rights have been violated up, down, and sideways.
Absolutely.
So I think that President Trump is well justified if he were to pardon them. But there should also be an investigation into whether the FBI was involved in infiltrating these groups and inciting people to go inside. Because there are people that we have seen on film that were
Right.
federal agents. They were wearing
right.
MAGA hats and they were encouraging people to go in. So there is an entrapment level or an entrapment aspect to this entire case. And I think that it needs to be investigated, and those individuals should be investigated too.
100%. So many of them have, even people who did not even trespass or never even entered the Capitol, who were just outside the building, right? In that day, are in prison. Okay. So there's a lot that has to be had, and the American people want justice. So that's another category of political prisoners. And then you have people like Steve Bannon, right? Steve Bannon, who was sent to prison for ignoring the subpoena from Congress. And the reason he did that, because he claimed presidential immunity, which a lot of legal experts say he had perfect legitimate reasons to do so. You have Tina Peters who's right now in Colorado prison for just challenging some of this election irregularities that were going on, and she's basically been proven since as being right. She's right now in prison, and you have others, right? So this is they've weaponized it. This is so it's very communist, if you will. It's the beginning, right? It's what they do. They use the Justice Department against their own people, the government against its own citizens, and it has lasting effects. And I still think that we're going to see the lasting consequences of this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely think so.
And that is why it is so important we get someone good in the FBI. Okay, so let's talk about the FBI pick to head this up, because that's got to be cleaned out. When you have Catholics who are being targeted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as they were in this last administration, it's come out. I mean, it's out of control. It's completely is out of control. FBI, quick primer, Michael. Do you have any just insight on just the history of FBI, where it comes from, and who's behind it, and why do we even have it? Because it was not there on day one when George Washington was president.
No, it certainly wasn't. The FBI came into existence in 1908 under the insistence of President Teddy Roosevelt. And the reason was you had the assassination of President William McKinley, and there were some investigations that took place. There was concern about the growing threat of anarchists. So what President Roosevelt did, he said, okay, we need to start kind of our own investigative bureau. They were borrowing from the Secret Service. They were trying to borrow from the Treasury Department, and it just wasn't working. It was obvious that they needed to start something different. So he started a task force of special agents called the Bureau of Investigation. That was the first word or the first title that it was given. So under the Bureau of Investigation, it was primarily set to look into this assassination of McKinley and the growing threat of the anarchists throughout the United States. And then it ballooned. It went into looking into houses of prostitution because of the White Slave Traffic Act, also called the Mann Act of 1910. So the Federal Bureau, or the Bureau of Investigation, was tasked with investigating white slave trafficking, prostitution, that kind of stuff. Then in the 1930s, it was changed to the Federal Bureau of Investigation when the Act of Prohibition was passed by Congress and the sale of alcohol was now deemed illegal. So the FBI, because a lot of these sales were taking place across state lines, you had trafficking across state lines, they determined that it was a federal crime. First of all, because it was a federal act that prohibited alcohol, the sale of alcohol, but also because most of this was being trafficked across state lines. So they used the FBI primarily to go after the bootleggers, the people that were producing and selling alcohol illegally. And then, of course, that started getting into the investigation of organized crime because you had a lot of mafioso who were conducting these operations. And then in the 1940s, you had the FBI going after espionage. So you had the Nazis fighting against the Allies, and the Nazis were the ones who were landing in Rhode Island. You know, there was a submarine that landed in Rhode Island. A couple of Nazi agents came out, and the FBI was able to track them down and get them. You had another instance where a Nazi submarine off the coast of New York. And so these 8 Nazi agents went into New York, and they were eventually rounded up by the FBI also. So the FBI was then going after espionage. That led directly after the end of World War I or World War II to the investigation of communists and communist activities, because the big bad at that time was the Soviet Union. And you had Soviet agenteurs who were in the United States, and they were trying to foster all kinds of acts of espionage and theft of state secrets. And they were going in and causing sedition by handing out pamphlets and inciting riots. So the FBI then was tasked, and its major task at that time, from the late 1940s all the way into the 1960s and 70s, was really to go after the communists. And that, of course, spilled into a lot of the underworld, like the mafia, organized crime. That went into a lot of the civil rights stuff, because there were a lot of civil rights activists who were known to be associates of communist agents, and they had communist handlers. You had the workers' right, or the workers' movements, the unions were infiltrated by communists, and so the FBI had its fingers in all kinds of pots. And what this did is it ballooned the need for agents, the need for training, the need for underground operations. So you had agents that were, first of all, the agents in the 40s and 50s would simply have informants. They would have somebody who was operating in a communist cell, or you had somebody that the FBI would recruit to go into a communist cell and gather information. And I know all this because my grandparents were deeply involved in this kind of thing. So I got an upfront, close and personal account of how this worked.
Your grandparents were FBI agents?
No, my grandparents worked with the FBI and FBI informants who were going into the communist cell networks. My grandfather was regularly taking pictures of communist agents. He was, oh yeah. He went into a communist cell meeting with a tie-tack microphone and a tape recorder taped under his arm. So, yeah.
Don, and you're also a descendant of Paul Revere, if I remember that correctly, right?
Not directly. He would be a cousin. His mother was a Hichborn.
Close enough, man. That's pretty cool. So anyway, you got some good blood in you. So, wow. I mean, so so the in the 1970s they were, you know, anti-communist, and then it just continued to balloon.
Right.
Into,
And it grew and grew. And the thing is, in the 1980s, it got revamped. 1984, it got revamped, and it was looking more towards domestic terrorism. And then by the time communism fell, they said, you know what, we need to revamp it again because, well, communism isn't the threat anymore. So they swapped, and they started looking at not just domestic terrorism, but also cyber crimes. So they created a cyber crimes unit. They started to revamp their monitoring techniques and their lab techniques, and they were looking for white collar crimes, you know, big time white collar crimes. Drug drug stuff was a big part of, sort of. I mean, they were working with the ATF, but drugs, the war on drugs, did become a lot of what the FBI was doing. So by the time 9/11 took place, the FBI was monitoring just tons of stuff. They even got into, I think the FBI was involved in the creation of something called Carnivore, which was an email monitoring system, so that they could or monitor email traffic and look for keywords that would alert them to, you know, a threat of one kind or another. So all of this developed through the FBI, and I mean, they've got so many agents now, and their mission is so broad and diverse that they have almost become what it was afraid that they would become, a secret police force, kind of working and operating for political interests. And when you look at how it's been used under the Biden administration, and actually also under the Obama administration, and even going back to the Clinton administration, when you had the FBI involved in sending Elian Gonzalez back to communist Cuba, even though his mother died trying to bring him to a free country. You have the FBI involved with Ruby Ridge and with the debacle in Waco. All of it under the auspices of fighting domestic terrorism, but there are other elements to it that maybe they overstepped their boundaries and they really shouldn't have done what they did. So they became political operatives,
especially after the Patriot Act, right? That obviously had a huge effect on their ability to surveil everyday Americans, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that really is kind of the concern here. It's like, how much power are you going to give this federal agency, and to what end? Why would you give so much power to this federal agency when that same power, or at least similar powers, should be given to local police and local law enforcement to conduct the same investigations? Why are we saying that the federal government needs to be involved in monitoring and investigating domestic terrorism, when in fact that should be an act of the local police? Because to be quite honest, I don't think I want the federal agents involved in a possible domestic terrorist situation, because the definition of a domestic terrorist is going to be set by the FBI. And what they determined, what we know from a memo that came out just a couple of years ago, traditional Catholics were identified as potential domestic terrorists. Similar things came out with regard to, because pro-lifers were identified as potential domestic terrorists by Barack Obama and his cronies. So it becomes a very dangerous game here when you start playing with terms and you give that much power to a federal agency, and it really needs to be cut
with very little oversight or very little accountability. And it's, I mean, really the Senate, the Congress has oversight over them, but the way that they've also, the FBI in recent years has blown off even what Congress is asking of them it shows that, illustrates that precisely, that it's out of control and it needs to be reined in. That's
Absolutely,
why
I think so too.
the appointment is so key, that we got to be praying that the right man for the job gets in there and cleans it up, because it does, it was a fantastic history, just briefly kind of what it went into. From originally, it's almost like the Secret Service started in 1908, basically to protect the president, right? and then it just kind of went into the more like organized crime. And then after World War II, it was anti-communist, and then 2001 or in and around there, it was focused on terrorism. But it has potential for some good, a lot of good, but the right man's got to clean it up, and this can be quite a task. So Kash Patel, this guy, what do you think about this guy? Let me when you read that news, have you heard? Did you know Kash, or what's your thought? What are your thoughts?
Well, I knew him by reputation. I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to his activities and what he was doing in the previous administration. I knew him mostly as a co-host on Steve Bannon's War Room. So I got to know a little bit about him and his perspective during that time period. And I really liked a lot of what he said, and his concern about federal overreach and the over bloated bureaucracy of the federal government, I thought was spot on. So I very much appreciated his perspective.
Yes.
In terms of what he's done or how he intends to do things, I'm still new to this, so I'm not really aware of what he can do and what he is aware of. But he's a keen intellect. He obviously is aware of the problem that's taking place within the Bureau itself, and he knows that there's got to be a weeding process to say, okay, these people are certainly operating under a certain political pretext. They really shouldn't be here. But I really appreciate what he says.
Absolutely. We don't know him personally here, but we know a lot of the people that are close to him and are friends with him, and they're good people. I think one of the marks of a man is not only who you are and show yourself to be, but it's the people you surround yourself with. And that also says a lot. And those people that are around him, that I know personally, are good people, and they have they've endorsed him as a great candidate, right? So there were a group of us conservative leaders that made a big statement yesterday in support of Kash. Kevin Roberts, for one, from Heritage, we did, and some a lot of other notable names. It's on our website, on our Good News, which you can see. So the right people have got to get in. It's serious. This is not just minor things we're talking about. It's central to America and to the world, how America sees, or the world sees America, that we have justice back in our country. Going on to our last kind of point, this is going to be absolutely big right from day one. And isn't it crazy, Michael, to see how President Trump is just hitting the ground running right now, and foreign leaders are responding to him like even before he's president. Like, how about Trudeau's visit to Mar-a-Lago? Did you see that one?
Please don't tariff Canada.
How crazy was that? I mean, I think the President Trudeau just basically showed up, as I was reading, just to Mar-a-Lago, the Palm Beach airport, said, "Hey, I'm here." And so he crashed Thanksgiving meal and sat with the president. People near the president, they said they overheard the conversation and went something to the effect of, Mr. President Trump, you can't impose 25% tariffs on us. He said, and Trudeau's like, that would destroy our economy. Trump's reply was, well, become the 51st state then, like,
right. Yep.
So, obviously he's probably not being serious, but it's, you got to hold the line. And obviously the 25% tariffs that he's trying to impose are because, this is the point we want to get into, is because of the drugs and illegal immigration, which is pouring into our country from both the north and the southern border, right?
Absolutely.
So this is a human, what's the word? It's a crisis for so many people who are innocent. Like I was actually driving home from church the other day, and saw just, we were going on the road, and I saw by the bus stop, it's always hot in Phoenix, but the sun was shining brightly, and there was the bus stop, and then on the other side, like on the ditch side, trying to get some shade, was a mother. She was probably like 27 years old, and she had 3 little girls. Okay. So I was driving, saw that, and I'm like, okay, that's for sure. That's got to be migrants, illegal immigrants, right? and swung the car around and just parked, just went up and talked to them. And yeah, sure enough, they're from Guatemala. They've been here a few months. They obviously just spoke Spanish. Just heartbreaking to see, for one thing, these migrants. I asked where they lived, and she said, "Oh yeah, I work at the back or I live at the back of one of these stores over here. So probably a friend who owns a little Mexican store or whatever it is, or Hispanic store." And she just let him stay there in the back. And we were chatting up for a little bit, and she automatically goes, "Can I help? Can I clean your house for you? Can I clean your apartment?" Right? How for work? She's looking for work. And I'm like, "Where's your husband at?" And he's, she said, "Oh, he's in a different state right now." I'm like, whatever that means. So he's not in the picture, at least not in the right there to help him.
Right.
She's alone. She's got 3 little girls, and there was one baby like 2 years old, 4-year-old, and maybe like a 10-year-old. And gave him some water, gave him a little bit of money too, but when we talk about what the mission of Tom Homan is to restore order, because there's roughly 18 million people that have come into this country. I'm not doing this with a blind heart. Like, I know what these people, there's people who've gotten here almost against their will, some against their will. They've been approached by cartels, right?
Yep.
They're dragged out of their house. They're literally forced either into prostitution and brought up to the southern border, or their kids are sought, basically like, unless you give us your kids, or unless you come with us, we're taking your kids.
Well, we've currently got 300,000 missing kids,
It's always remember the kids, though that really is the biggest category, if you will, of Democrat Party political prisoners. Because while they're not prisoners in some jail, those 320,000 kids, which you brought up that number, right? Which is what we officially know is the amount of unaccompanied migrant children who are missing. They've been sent off by the NGOs to adoptive parents, adoptive creeps, a lot of them, and they never report back for their checkups. They're missing. We have no idea where they're at. Okay. Those are the children that Jim Caviezel wakes up around 3 a.m. every day, as he told me, and hears their screams in his dreams. Okay. As they're being molested or whatever's happening to them. Okay. So those are the political prisoners. Those are the biggest group. You got the J6, you got the pro-lifers, you got the whatever. You got Trump's been targeted, right? His house, the FBI, all that. But those kids.
Well, the bottom line here, and this goes to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. There's a reason why this country has laws. And to be honest, a lot of times people want to point to the fact that the United States has border laws so that we can protect our own citizens. And this is true. We want to make sure that we're not getting criminals just coming into this country without documentation, or coming into this country at all. We want to be able to stop them at the border. We want to make sure that domestic terrorists are not coming in, or saboteurs or espionage artists or whatever they are. But there's another side to this. And the reason that we have laws when it comes to immigration is so that we can make sure that the people who are coming in are safe. It's to protect them as well. And, so many times we hear the Democrat left, and they complain and they scream about, you hate immigrants, you hate these migrants, you don't like refugees, and you don't want them here, you're racists. That's not true. The fact of the matter is, I want them to be here safely if they're going to come in. And I want to make sure that their family is protected. I want to make sure their children are protected, which means we have documentation of who you are, who you're with, where you're going, where you're going to be. That's why we have these laws.
Well said. In other words, walls protect both sides.
Yes.
Walls benefit both sides of the southern border and on our side, right? So it's crazy, and that's why I think. By the way, I think we have totally flipped it of the narrative. The biggest jury decision really in America was the election. Okay, where Americans came out and said, what's going on the southern border is just not cool. I'm not even a Republican, or I'm not whatever. I'm not independent. but Trump's got to fix the border, okay? And what the Democrats have allowed and have caused the rest of us to have basically our economy damaged through inflation, yes, in part because of that. The crime in our neighborhoods. You have the CEO of United Healthcare was shot this morning, killed in New York City.
I saw that.
Do not know if that's a migrant, but there
It looked
had
like
been.
a hit. I saw the video.
Was it really?
Yeah.
So
The
there
guy
you
put
go.
a silencer on his gun, followed him from behind. He was very definitely a targeted hit, and then he bolted as soon as he did it. So there was no other motive. It looked like it was very deliberate. What the motive would be, I don't know. But
Right. Or Lake and Riley. I mean, that's a weird left for sure. That's definitely a migrant, right? Who came in and just killed her in cold blood, right? The 22-year-old female nurse in Georgia, right? So it's sick, man, and we got to clean it up. And that's why I think it's because it's just a common sense issue. I got a kick out of this article. The new hero of Republicans is New York City Mayor Eric Adams, revealed on Tuesday that he is open. This is like the liberal New York City mayor, okay?
Mhm.
Let his city be overrun and destroyed pretty much by all these people coming in. So now Eric Adams revealed on Tuesday that he is open to meeting with the incoming Trump border czar, Tom Homan, Catholic, to develop solutions to take on illegal immigrant criminals as he dismissed criticism from the left, telling critics, "Cancel me." Adams was asked at a press conference about whether he would meet with Homan, who was picked by President Trump to lead the mass deportation operation he intends to launch after he's sworn into office. Adams stressed the city's openness to immigrants and emphasized the work being done to help migrants apply, blah, blah, blah. So how about that? I mean, you got a Democrat mayor, right? Who's like,
well, at the end of the day, this goes to what we talked about in one of our previous episodes, that the left has so overreached. They've gotten so insane.
That's right.
That the Democrats are looking, a lot of Democrats are looking at this going, I'm to the left, I'm a lefty, but you guys are nuts. And the influx of criminals in New York City, because it's a sanctuary city, he rightly noted they are the ones who are committing heinous crimes against citizens of New York. And he even said, look, if you want a mayor who's going to kowtow to these criminals and release them and not cooperate with ICE, you got the wrong mayor. And, kudos to him for actually standing up to the citizens that he was elected to protect.
Absolutely. And the trend is shifting over. Like even in Chicago, you see this? Come here first. Chicago woman begs Trump border czar to make an example out of the Democrat mayor. An irate African-American woman at a Chicago City Council meeting Monday asked President Trump and Tom Homan, whom he picked to be his border, to make an example out of Mayor Brandon Johnson. Danielle Carter, a Chicago fitness trainer, took aim at Mayor Johnson over the city's ongoing migrant crisis and his pledge to resist Trump's administration's deportation efforts. Tom Homan, this is a quote. Tom Homan, make an example out of this NEGRO right here first, she said. Please come here first because you know what? We're going to help you, right? So it's common sense. And what drives me up the wall is when you have Tom Homan over here is a good guy. He really is. He's been a great friend. We've referenced his Catholic faith. It really is a bedrock for him. And he is putting himself and his family on the line. We just saw the death threats that came out. I mean, he's been getting death threats for the last 4 years, but even more so now against him and his family. And you have our Catholic leaders who not only are we not really showing support for him and what he's trying to do, and it's the opposite. We read the letter from the Iowa bishops and kind of what they were saying a couple weeks back, about. So we got to be speaking up. We got to support. We got to hold the line. We got to keep logic. We got to keep reason here. Okay. We have a heart for those who are across, even those who are here illegally, because a lot of them are against their will. But justice has got to be done for these African American women who city's been destroyed. It's usually like a come and save our city, right? So this is an issue that's going to keep coming up in the next few weeks.
I completely agree. And I think that it's the more people that wake up to the shenanigans that have been taking place over the last, 16 years, really, from the just the hard left ever since Barack Obama took office. I remember under the Bush administration, I'm not a Bush supporter. I didn't like him. He's skull and bones. He's a neocon. But I will say this: when he was president, racism was not an issue. It was not an issue. You didn't have Black Lives Matter marching through the streets. You didn't have all these protests and these
right.
And the fact of the matter is they were Marxists, and they were instigated by Marxists, and they stirred the pot. And it was the whole Trayvon Martin thing under President Obama, when he said, "Well, he could have been my son." Way to stir the pot there, Mr. President. Why not keep the peace? Why not say, let's not make this a racial issue? Why not? Let's talk about this as a criminal act if there was a crime involved at all. Instead, they stir the pot, they stir the pot, they stir the pot, and they whip people up into a frenzy.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. But I think that the especially the African Americans that are here in this country, that are real and true citizens, and maybe they've been voting Democrat their whole life, but they're starting to wake up and they're saying, you know what? They've been whipping us into a frenzy, and they're not giving us a thing. They're still treating us like second and third class citizens. And we're not getting the promised goods that we keep getting promised. And on top of that, they're making a racial issue out of something that's not a racial issue. So I think that we are going to see that softening of the race wars, as it was over the last 16 years. We're going to see a softening of that, and we're going to see a reintegration, a rejoining of our civilization, where people are saying it's not about race. Let's talk about law. Let's talk about the process of law, and let's talk about making sure that we are safe and we're working together, and not pointing a finger at somebody just because I want to accuse someone of racism because I didn't get what I want.
Absolutely. And I think they're having a huge conscious exam right now about what policies they stand on, the Democrat Party, right? Because they were shattered, right?
Mm-hmm.
I read a great piece this morning about the founder of Catholics for Kamala. Like, what a joke. Came out and basically publicly admitted that the reason that she was devastated at the polls by Catholics was she refused to engage with them, hashtag El Smith dinner, but also because the Democrat Party as a whole has just left the interest of the Catholic religious people behind, okay, completely, and just, stomped on them, right? And looking at that, okay, that's the practical effect. And the quote, the religious interests of the Catholic people, hold that quote in your mind. What are the religious interests of the Catholic people? That's why organizations like ours and other people out there, our job is to ultimately evangelize, okay? Because if we do the work of evangelization, that will bear fruit in the political world. Because when it comes time to casting your votes, if your heart is where it should be before the Lord, and you're well-formed, and you're catechized, and you know your faith, and you're trying to get to heaven, like, you're gonna smell where the truth is, right? And I think that's what happened. And so many people across this country, on Catholics, largest Catholic landslide in practically U.S. history, or at least since Ronald Reagan at the election. And that's awesome. So that is why we got to keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
We have to, it's time for the I'm going to throw the post of the week and bridge right into that, share what's trending. And I'm going to tell you why I chose this post when you see this on the screen. Okay, get this. St. Ignatius High School, a Catholic school in Cleveland, has a ministry serving as pallbearers for individuals with little or no family, ensuring they are honored at funerals. Known as the Arimathea, after Joseph of Arimathea, pallbearer ministry, it involves about 400 students who assist at 150 to 180 funerals annually. One student shared that while the experience is deeply sad and heartbreaking, it also helped him gain a greater appreciation for the role of family in his life. People, why did I choose that? Because that we're talking about the religious interests of the Catholic people or forming the Catholic mind. Number one, it's got to start with young people, right? It absolutely has to, right? And you've got to be talking, whether it's our priest, our lay evangelist, or whatever, about the eternal things: heaven, hell, death, purgatory, sin, because this brings it to the forefront of what the heck we're here on this earth for in the first place. And I think it's the first time I've ever heard about that. I think it's a great idea. I would assume you would agree, Michael. It's a good idea that these
Not
kids
just a
kind
good
of
idea, but it's one of the corporal works of mercy. Burying the dead is a corporal work of mercy, and that's exactly why it's very important for young men to be aware of death, because it helps remind them of their own mortality. It focuses on the reality of what happens, death, judgment, heaven and hell. So when you die, you will be judged. And if you have that perspective, you start with, I'm going to die someday, which means I'm going to be judged someday, which means I will either end up in heaven or hell one of these days. You have that perspective, and it helps to foster virtue. And I think that a ministry like this is not only desperately needed for the sake of the souls that are suffering in purgatory and helping to perform that work of mercy, being a witness to those who have died and have no one to pray for them, to be able to pray for them. I think that's extremely important. But to form good citizens within this country, also giving them that perspective on the end of life for themselves is going
absolutely.
to lay the foundation for exactly what we need in this country.
Absolutely. I mean, the famous phrase in Latin is just awesome. It's quid hoc ad eternitatem. What is this in relationship to eternity? Like whatever decision you take, you look at it in light of how does this affect where I'm going to go, where I
Mhm.
plan to go after I'm dead? Okay. If
Yeah.
every politician had that in their minds, a lot would be different in this world, even of us, right? That's what sin is, when we fail to really fully comprehend what our life's about. And speaking of the whole life death issue, I wanted to just invite you to pray really quick and throw that screen, that shot up of that friend of ours, mutual friend, Mike, in his final moments. This is Mike and his dear wife, Beverly. Mike passed away just yesterday. And the image of him surrounded by the Carmelites, if you could throw that on there,
Yeah.
I just want everyone to take that in. Again, as we kind of close off this show, we talked a lot about politics and the human, the side of things, but when it gets down to it, we're all going to be one of those beds one day, right? We are. And just look at the beauty of our Catholic faith. So you have those Carmelites who are kneeling around that man, Mike, was a great supporter of Catholics for Catholics, and just praying as his soul was leaving his body, definition of death, and going before his judgment. And what a powerful testament, not only the beauty of our faith, but also what life's about. And I just ask you, just really keep in your prayers today for Beverly. It's this, her husband died, her first husband died in 21 from COVID.
Yeah.
And, she was blessed to find another husband. And then shortly after this happened. So she's been through a lot. She's a great woman. And really, please pray for her and family and for the repose of the soul of Mike. And as we end off this show, I thought it'd be fitting, it's all about justice for all, and making sure that we restore justice. Remember, religion, by the way, is defined ultimately as justice towards God. Okay, so it's justice towards others, and charity, but then justice towards God's religion, right? So it's an important virtue, and I thought it'd be unless you have any final words, Michael, but I'll bridge right into just the song, which it really kind of encompasses what's gone on these past 4 years under the Biden regime, and what a great gift from God that he blessed us with the election of an imperfect man, yes, like we all are, of President Trump. And it shows some of the great warriors of our country. And we pray for their release, the release of the pro-lifers, and the release of those victims of human trafficking over the past 4 years. Thank you all, and I invite you to watch this film, and we'll see you next week.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watch, words of gallantly streaming. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.